Hi everyone, Nick's here. Today I want to talk about my thoughts on Necropolis so far, after playing for about a week and something by the time this video comes out. So currently I'm level 80-ish or so, and this is what I've done in the league so far. I've finished the campaign, going as fast as I can this time around, and I made it in about 14 hours, which I know isn't much for most people, but it's a big step for me. You know, it's only my third time doing the campaign, so yeah, 14 hours, I'll take it. Hopefully, on my next character, I can even shave that down a bit more. I also bought a supporter pack, but not the turtle, and chat hates me for that. But yeah, I think it's important to support the devs, and what I could afford was a supporter pack. So there we go, we got one of those, and actually I'm really happy with the way it looks on my character, so awesome. I also partnered up with Subtractum so he could teach me the basics of crafting. It was a really fun video, go check it out. It's definitely my least edited video on the channel, which makes me a bit anxious. But I think it's better just to see how we were vibing and how he was teaching me stuff and my reactions and stuff like that. But thanks to him, I have a much better understanding of like the basics of crafting and where to go from here, which will come in later in this video, by the way. So yeah, go check out Subtractum if you haven't already. I'm sure you have, but go follow him. I also crafted some simple gear during the campaign, thanks to his tips. Nothing groundbreaking, but I thought it was important for me to like start messing around with all the currencies and see where I can get, and also get a more realistic interpretation of what it means to craft an item during a campaign. Once the campaign was done, I reached maps, of course, and I wanted to craft, but I didn't have the currencies I needed, and I didn't want to take any free currencies from viewers or whatever. So I went ahead and bought some gear with the Chaos Orbs that I had. I had like 5 or 6 Chaos Orbs. So I bought some gear, which helped a lot, and it was interesting to like go into the trade of Path of Exile again. It's definitely not perfect, especially at league start. I feel like a lot of people ignore you because they're either really busy, or when you're trying to sell an item, if you don't react in the second, usually people are spamming other sellers at the beginning of the league potentially. So that means that you need to be really reactive with the invites if you're trying to make some money and sell an item. I also played around with the Necropolis crafting, which we'll talk about in a second. And of course, I've reached yellow maps, which is awesome. So in this video, let's talk about the pros, the cons, and what I want to do next. So let's start with the pros. On this new character, I play as a Exploding Arrow Ballista build by PAL. It's kind of a glass cannon build, really. You've got Ziz's build, which is much more tankier and can work for hardcore. What I'm playing is much more fragile, but a lot more damage, which I'm happy with. And it helps me also focus on movements. It's quite punishing if you're not careful, which I enjoy. It's Ballista can be a bit brain dead at times, like in terms of the build. So focusing on the movement is helpful. It keeps me engaged. You have to keep in mind, this is only the 3rd character that I've finished the campaign with, like this build. So for me, it still feels really fresh to try new builds, which I really like. I also think it's a pro that I got to play around in the campaign with the Lantern of Aramor. That's the new feature, right? That happens every time you enter a new zone or a map. You get to kind of tweak some modifiers on the mobs. It kept the campaign fresh for me. I know for a lot of people, if you've done the campaign a million times, you probably, it's not really what you want to do. You just want to get through it. But for me, the campaign is still, a big part of my gameplay. So it was fun to try a new kind of mechanic. And this was pre-patch. With the patch, it's even better as the UI has been tweaked a bit, and you can see the corpse percentage chance on the UI even better, which is awesome. I really like what they did with the streamlining of some of the maps, especially what they did to scarabs, right? Where they kind of filtered everything down to scarabs. And that's really good for a specific reason for me, because I found out that what I love about Path of Exile is that feeling of dropping something extremely rare. You know what I mean? That sweet sound that tells you you've dropped something of value. I really like that. And scarabs are part of that for me at this state. So when I drop something like a scarab, even if it's like kind of mid in terms of what it does, it's still like a nice feeling. So yeah, I like that. I like that change. And I like that I'm also able to focus on scarabs as like a goal potentially. One thing that has definitely happened this league that had never happened to me before in Path of Exile is that I'm starting to learn how to think like a Path of Exile player, meaning that I'm setting goals for myself and I'm trying to put the points in the passive skill tree, the Atlas passive tree, and just make it work in terms of like what my goals are. And I'm also starting to think like a Path of Exile player in terms of the currencies and what they mean and how you craft. And so little by little, things are really opening up to me. I'm also looking further ahead and thinking about the league mechanics and what I potentially want to focus on this league, which I really haven't really thought about. I definitely want to discover a bit more about Necropolis, but yeah, just in general, that part I really enjoy. Like starting to think like a Path of Exile player. It only took like 300 hours, but here we are. It's becoming fun. Speaking of fun, I also enjoy the All Flame Embers. Those like I don't know if we call them currency, but those little bottles that you can add to mobs while you're playing Necropolis, like on the Lantern of Aramor UI. My favorites are change everything to frogs or change everything to rats. It's just like a quirky little thing, but yeah, I enjoy them. It's also fun dropping them and kind of discovering what the effects are going to be. I know by browsing online that there are some really busted combination of mobs and embers to try out. I'm looking forward to potentially speccing my Atlas tree into embers and, getting more of those. That would be great. Another pro for me was the speed at which they released that patch was really incredible. So if you don't know, the league came out on Friday, and then they released a patch on Wednesday after that to patch like some of the biggest stuff that people found. And I thought that was super interesting how fast they got that out. Obviously, the game's been out for a long time, so they know what they're doing in terms of patches. Well, you'd think so anyway in releases. But I thought the speed at which they got through all this stuff is incredible. I'm curious to know what the size of the team of Path of Exile is, because as someone who works in software engineering myself, I sometimes feel like process can kind of bog down releases. And when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, you're bogged down by all the process I've just mentioned. Like everything has to be validated by a million people. It feels like here they have some kind of like product owner of some sorts or a product manager that gets the final call on what goes in. That's probably Mark, sorry. But yeah, really, really impressed by how fast they fixed it. And it also tells me that they're able to fix things quite quickly, which is a positive for the game in general. In some of the games, if something didn't work really well, you'd probably have to wait for conversations and pre-patches, and you'd say this is going to release in 2 weeks and stuff like that. I really like the idea that they're just really agile with it and Path of Exile, and they're able to get stuff out quickly. I really appreciate it. Cons. Let's go and talk about my cons. So I only have two, but they are worth talking about. So the first one is that although the Necropolis crafting has been buffed, despite my best efforts, I think it's a bit too complicated for me. There is a simple way to approach it, but I've found that most of my crafts are just not what I want them to be, or they're just disappointing. Unfortunately, they were better when I was playing the campaign in a way, because I was able to kind of overlook some of the modifiers that I didn't want or that I didn't need, as long as I had like one of the modifiers I wanted. But as you go further in the game, you realize that you need like 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe even 6 specific modifiers on an item for it to be good. And that's why I think the Necropolis crafting can kind of not work for me, not click for me. And I know some of people online are doing really well with it, but for me, I've just found it really, really complicated without a third-party tool. And still a con using third-party tool and with a pro at the same time, because it just helps things. But that's my go-to noob-friendly technique now for the future of Necropolis, for me anyway. What I'm going to focus on is I'm going to do one item at a time. And then what I do is I go in Path of Exile, I pick the item and the modifiers I want to create, and I let Path of Exile tell me what corpses I need to collect, and then I go from there. And I'm able to kind of narrow down the crafting to something a bit simpler for me, basically. And yeah, I learned that thanks to Subtractem, who taught me about Path of Exile. So hey, here we go. Yeah, it's good. Talking with the community also has helped me a lot. So yeah, on the Necropolis crafting, it's just too much for me, I think. And I'm really curious as to what other noobs like me think about that. Like, how do you feel about the Necropolis crafting? Have you kind of dropped it, or are you like sweating it, going really hard on it? Like, how are you doing? Speaking of crafting, another con that I have, my second con, is that I really wanted to practice the basics of crafting during the campaign, but I found that I just didn't have enough currencies. So I'm sure things are leveled in a certain specific way. GGG knows what they're doing. But I found it to be a bit of a shame that I could only learn about crafting in Path of Exile once I had enough currencies, like a lot of currencies, to try out things and make mistakes. In the beginning, making mistakes is really costly on your currencies. So what would happen is I would try something, make a mistake, and then I'd have to wait like another 5 hours to have enough currencies to try again. And I didn't find that great for teaching, for learning about crafting. I feel like it would have been better if there was just another way. And I guess there is another way. You can go on craftofexile.com and you can kind of practice there. But for people who are quite new to the game, potentially, there's a bit of a blocker in learning what crafting is all about. So yeah, I'm only able to play around with my crafting now, multiple hours into mapping, now that I have enough currencies, which is okay-ish, and I can make some fine yellow items at this point. But as I mentioned before, when I'm looking for very specific modifiers at this point, then crafting is just, very punitive, I think, at this point in time, especially in terms of the currencies. So yeah, I'm still going to be doing some crafting, which brings me to what I want to discover soon, or what I want to do next, basically. First, these are my goals for this league, in a way. First one is I want to get back to bossing. Bossing was one of my favorite things that I did last league, and I was only able to do so because my mods and the great community and the guild were like kind of pooled their currencies to let me try these bosses together for challenges. And that's how I was able to play them and defeat them, which is great. But it kind of didn't give me an idea of like, what is the price actually? What is the cost of trying one of these bosses? And so I want to do that myself this time. I want to try and focus on, if I want to, defeat Shaper or something, like I want to be able to say I got all the currencies to get into Shaper, and this means a lot more to me now than it used to. Something along those lines. I would also love to try and build my own passive tree. I think it'd be key. I think it could be a fun and a good way for me to, peek into what building a passive skill tree would look like. But instead of jumping into the passive skill tree of a build, I'm actually going to try and do Atlas passive skill tree, because I think that tree is, again, more forgiving, and we have 3 of them now also, which is fantastic. I haven't unlocked them, but that's really good. So I want to make my own. I want one of those 3 to be, one of them should be my own thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to set my own goals. I know some league mechanics which I really like Abyss, that green stuff. I love it. Harvest isn't too bad, and because I want to do a bit of crafting, maybe I should focus on that. And I do want to make a skill tree that has to do with Necropolis, because I feel like I owe it to the game to kind of discover everything there is to discover about how far you can go in Necropolis. Maybe not on the crafting side of things, but maybe on the Lantern of Aramor and the Allflame Embers, stuff like that. I don't know where I'm going to get to it, though, because time is precious to me and to all of us, of course, but hopefully soon. Another thing I want to do is I want to craft a really high piece of gear by myself, or I want to try at least. I want to pick like a really good item that I want with like at least 4 modifiers that I need, and I want to make that myself, like learn and, read some guides and whatnot, and just like really try and understand how crafting works. And I think the important part here is not to get lost into like other league mechanics in terms of crafting, but to actually focus on what is the basics of crafting and how do I get there. So yeah, the last goal is I want to play in a reduced market. I felt like playing in like standard league is fantastic, especially buying items. Like it can be a bit frustrating, like getting the items you want, of course, and the prices and the currencies and all that, fine. So what I want, which still, it makes it great. It's a great resource. But what I want now is to potentially play in a smaller reduced market and see what happens there. Which brings me, of course, to plugging the fact that we've got a private league coming on the 26th of April, and we're crowdfunding, so make sure to check the link in the description for that. But yeah, I'm very excited for our private league where we're going to be playing with a limited amount of market currencies and stuff like that. It's going to be really exciting. So I guess where do we go from now? I want to let you tell me, let you decide. And yeah, I think that's about it. Do you have any advice for me? Leave it in the comments. I think we're going to see you in the next one. Thank you so much, guys, and see you soon. Oh, by the way, I'm live on Twitch right now. Go on Twitch.